If you're constantly reaching for your mouse to do different code editing tasks such as navigating to files and so on, this is the perfect video for you because I'm going to share with you dozens of my favorite keyboard shortcuts in VS Code. I'm going to break it down by different categories. So we're going to deal with things like text editing, like how you can delete whole lines really easily, how you can duplicate lines super easily and things like that. We're also going to be covering things like tab management. So how can you create different tabs? How can you navigate between which side of the screen your tabs are showing on? I'm also going to talk about panel management. So how can you manage all the different panels inside of VS Code entirely using just your keyboard? And then we're going to get into some rather advanced stuff with dealing with symbols, such as this, navigating through different files, and even some debugging stuff. We're going to be rapid firing through these, so if you want a quick cheat sheet that you can use to reference all of these, I have fully functional cheat sheets with over 60 keyboard shortcuts, both for Windows and Mac and Linux that you can check out. I'll link it down in the description for you, and I even highlighted my favorite ones in this blue color, so you can really see which keyboard shortcuts I think are the best and most useful. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name is Kyle and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. And to get started, I have to talk about the basic text editing shortcuts I use all the time, but if you already know these basics, just jump ahead with the timestamps in the description. So the very obvious ones are Control-C, Control-X, and Control-V. Control-C just copies whatever you highlight, and then Control-V lets you paste that down. Control-X is essentially the same as Control-C. It'll cut the content, so it'll delete the content, but it'll also still copy it, so then you can paste it down later with Control-V. Now, the thing that makes these keyboard shortcuts incredibly useful is if you don't select any content at all, it'll actually copy, delete, or cut the line you're on. For example, if I hit Control-C right here, it'll copy this entire line. And if I click Control-V, you can see I can now paste down more copies of that line. Same thing with Control-X, I can use it to delete a line and then paste it back. I actually use Control-X all the time just to delete lines because it's a really easy and quick keyboard shortcut. Now, another keyboard shortcut that's useful, but I don't use it as much, is Control-A, which lets you select all of the content in an entire file, which is really great if you just want to delete everything. Control-Z is what I've been doing to undo anything, and then Control-Shift-Z allows you to redo things, or you can hit Control-Y. Also, an important thing to note is that Control-Y only works on Windows, so if you're on Mac, just make sure you use Command-Shift-Z instead. And also, if you're on a Mac computer, just swap out Control for Command and Alt for Option, and all the keyboard shortcuts will be the same. And if there's any differences, I will make sure to mention it, or you can just download that Mac cheat sheet, which has them all listed out for you. Now, the last basic keyboard shortcut I use all the time, hundreds of times a day, is Control and the slash or question mark key, and that just comments out a line for you. It'll comment out anything that you have highlighted, it'll comment out all those different lines, which is really nice. Now we can move on to what I would consider some more advanced text editing keyboard shortcuts, and probably my favorite one is the autocomplete one and just triggering autocomplete. So let's say I'm inside this object and I want to see what keys are available for me to pass in. I can click Control plus space, and that's going to bring up that autocomplete. So I can see, hey, I have all these different options, layout, loader, and so on. So I can say I want to do layout here, and oh, I want to see what my options are. I can hit Control space. Obviously, it's not super useful here, but if I had something I was partially through typing, or I had a function name I was partially typing, Control space just allows you to get those autocomplete suggestions, which I really love. Also, if you have that Control space pulled up, you can click Tab or Enter, and that's just going to select whatever autocomplete option you want. And you can use the arrow keys to navigate through them, and then just choose whichever one you want. In the same kind of vein as autocomplete, if you have different errors or warnings inside of your code and you have your cursor over top of that, you can click Control and the period key, and that's going to pull up the quick fix option. You can again use your arrow keys to go through this, and this will allow you to find simple fixes or different things that it suggests for you, so I could add the disable to disable that warning. Now, one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts is Control-D. Control-D, if you're just selected on a word, what it'll do is it'll highlight that word and select it, so you can see I've selected this word page next to function. But if you have something selected and you hit Control-D again, it'll select the next instance of it. So now you can see I've selected both of these page words. If I click it again, it'll go to the next one. So now you can see all three instances of the word page have been selected on my page. Now, this only does it based on the text you have selected. So if I highlight just A, for example, every single time that I hit Control-D, it's just selecting another A on my page, just the next one every single time. And this is really great if you just want to make really simple changes. Like, for example, I want to change this from page to be something else. I can just do it like that, and there we go. I'm done. It's super quick and simple. Another really important thing is make sure your code is indented properly. And one of the easiest ways to do that is with the tab key. If you're just somewhere at the start of a line, you can hit tab to indent it. But if you're in the middle of your code and you click tab, obviously it doesn't indent your code. It just adds a tab character. So something that you can do instead is you can hit Control and then the square bracket that points to the right. And you can see doing that will actually push out this tab to the right. And if you want to indent it, or I'm sorry, outdent it by reducing the amount of tabbing, you can use the left square bracket and that'll bring it in. Or you can use Shift plus Tab. That'll also bring in the actual indentation. Another keyboard shortcut with those square brackets is going to be Control Shift plus either the right or the left square bracket. So if I hold down Control Shift and I hit the left square bracket, that's going to collapse the code that I'm inside of. So if I'm inside of a function or an object, it's just going to collapse that down. And the right square bracket is going to expand that for me. Now, if you're on a Mac computer, it's slightly different. It's Command Alt instead of Control Shift. Now, some other keyboard shortcuts that kind of build on these basic keyboard shortcuts, if you hold down Control Shift K, that just deletes whatever the current line you're on is. This is really useful because sometimes you don't want to use Control X to delete the entire line because you want to save whatever in your clipboard. So you can use Control Shift K, it'll delete the line, but it won't add it to your clipboard. So that is particularly useful in certain scenarios, but I 99% of the time just use Control X. Another really useful keyboard shortcut, let's say that you're in the middle of the line and you're typing some code and you want to now add some code either below or above this on the next line or the line above. If you hold down Control and hit Enter, that's going to add a new line directly below where you are. It's just going to take your cursor and move it directly below with a new line. Doesn't matter where your cursor is at, it's always going to put it on the bottom. If you hold down Control Shift Enter, it does the same thing but puts your cursor above on the line above. So this is really useful if you just say, okay, I'm done typing this, I want to go down to the next line or go down to the line above. Either way, this is a really useful keyboard shortcut. Another really useful way to move around your lines is if you hold down Alt and you hit the up or down arrow keys, you can move whatever line you're currently on up or down. This is incredibly useful if you just want to move something inside or outside of an if statement, or you want to move an if statement slightly higher to include more code, or just like anything like that. It's really useful and I use it way more than I thought I would. Now, the final kind of advanced text editing thing I want to talk about is going to be commenting out only the selected code. This essentially does a block level comment. So let's say that I want to comment out just the contact word inside of here. What I can do is I can hold down Shift Alt and then I can press A, and that's going to comment out only the particular code that I have highlighted. And it can go across lines too. So let's say I want to highlight out this code, Shift Alt A, and you can now see I've commented out just that particular code. It's very similar to the / because that's going to comment out this code like that. But the main difference is that you can comment out individual code on a line, while if you use Control / that's just going to comment out the whole line. So that's the slight difference between these two different options. Now, the next section I want to talk about is tab management, and I'm specifically referring to these tabs of editors at the top here. One of the most common keyboard shortcuts I use is to reopen a tab I close. So let's say I close this tab and I went, I actually want to have that tab open. Well, I could go into the file manager and find that exact file, or you can just hit Control Shift T and that'll open up whatever the last closed tab is. And it'll continually do this. So if I have other tabs that I've closed, you can see every time I hit Control Shift T, it's opening up whatever the last closed tab was. Another really useful keyboard shortcut is to navigate between your different tabs, and you can hit Control and then Tab, and that's going to give you a list of all your tabs in the order that you referenced them last. So whatever the last tab that you opened was is going to be the first one in the list, and you can navigate around to whatever tab you want, and it's going to bring you directly to that tab. You can also hold down Control Shift Tab, and that's going to give you the opposite order. It's going to start with the one that you opened the least recently, but honestly, I find that almost every time I'm swapping between one or two tabs that I have open. So I just hit Control Tab and it brings me to whatever the most recently opened tab is, which is a really easy way to swap between two different tabs. Now, if you're on a Mac computer, just note that instead of using Command, you're going to use Control for this particular keyboard shortcut. Now, another keyboard shortcut I really love is the ability to split between different panels. So instead of, doing the Control Tab technique to swap between two different panels, what if I just wanted to open them side by side? This is really easy to do. All I need to do is hold Control Alt, and then I can hit right. And what that's going to do is it's going to take this particular tab and move it over into the pane on the right. And if there's no pane on the right, it's going to create a brand new one. I can do that with another tab, for example, Layout. Let's say I want to move that to the right, Control Alt right, and now that's on the right-hand side. And if I click it again, you can see it's now created a brand new third panel on the right. If I want to move it back to the left, I do it to the left, and now it's moved onto this side on the right, but it's gone from the third panel to the second particular panel, and I can move it again all the way to the left side if I want. I can even swap my focus between these by using Control plus the number key. So Control 2 will bring my focus onto this page on the right, and Control 1 will bring it over onto the left-hand side. So I can swap between these, and I can move them around however I see fit. And again, this one's a little bit different on Mac. Instead of using Command, you will use Control on a Mac to do this different type of navigation. Another keyboard shortcut I really love is Control W, and that just allows you to close a tab. If I click Control W, it closes whatever my current tab is. Do it again, it closes my current tab. And if I want to close all the tabs that are currently open, I can hit Control K, and then I can hit Control W, and that closes every single tab that I've opened to give me a really fresh slate to start with. But let's say I want to have a few tabs open, I'll Control Shift T to bring them back up. Now in this next section, I want to talk about panel management in VS Code, and I'm specifically talking about things like the side panel over here, your terminal panel, the command prompt, all these different things that you use all the time that you want to be able to toggle open, closed, and so on. There's tons of different keyboard shortcuts for all of this. I'm going to first go over my favorite ones. If you hit Control plus the tilde key, that's going to open up the terminal. Click it again, it's going to close out your terminal. So this is a really great way to toggle open your terminal and then close it when you no longer need it. If you're on a Mac computer, again, you need to use Control instead of Command for this particular keyboard shortcut. Also, let's say that you have the terminal open and it's running something and you want to open a brand new terminal, hit Control Shift and the tilde key, and that now opens a brand new terminal so you can have multiple different terminals open. And if you're on a Mac, again, you need to make sure you use Control instead of Command for this particular command as well. My next favorite keyboard shortcut is Control B, and that allows me to toggle this sidebar open and close, because oftentimes when I'm writing code, I don't want this sidebar open, it gets in the way, so I hit Control B to close it. It gives me more space to write my code, and then when I need to open it up to maybe navigate around, I can click Control B to open that back up. Also, if I'm on another tab, for example, this search tab, I can click Control Shift E, and that brings me directly back to the Explorer. Now there are keyboard shortcuts for every single one of these different tabs, but I find 99% of the time I'm going directly to the Explorer, and that's the only one I care about. And you can even, when you're inside the Explorer, navigate around using your arrow keys and so on to navigate between files if you want to. I find a much easier and better way to search for a file though is hitting Control P. That'll open up a dropdown where you can search specifically for whatever file you want. So let's say I want to get my router file, I can click and it'll open up that exact file right where I want it to be. And this file searcher is really robust. You don't have to type out the full name. For example, if I wanted to go to my route parser, I could type in RP, and you can see I get my router provider and my route parser, my files that have R then P. So it's really, really nice for doing that. Another really important keyboard shortcut is Control Shift P, and this opens up the command palette. And this is essentially every single command that you can run inside of VS Code. Doesn't matter what it is. If you want to be able to run something inside VS Code, hit Control Shift P, and then you can start typing inside here. Oftentimes you may need to restart your TypeScript server. So you just type in TypeScript and there you go. You can restart your TypeScript server. Or if you don't know what the keyboard shortcut is for something, you can type in whatever thing that you want to do. For example, if I wanted to like split my editor, you could see what the keyboard shortcut is for that. Or if I wanted to comment out a line, you can see what the keyboard shortcut is for that, and so on. So it's really useful to not only check keyboard shortcuts, but also run commands that don't have keyboard shortcuts. And speaking of trying to figure out what keyboard shortcuts are, if you hit Control K and then Control S, this brings up a list of every single keyboard shortcut out there, and you can directly edit exactly what you want these keyboard shortcuts to be. And you can even edit like a JSON version of this file as well. If I just search for a keyboard here, you can see that there is a keyboard shortcut JSON file that I can open up and directly edit keyboard shortcuts inside of there. And again, the searching inside of here is really great, so you can search for exactly what you want. For example, if you wanted to comment something, here's all the comment related commands that you can do. You can see some don't have keyboard shortcuts, some do. Modify it, do whatever you want. This is a really great place to learn keyboard shortcuts and add your own. Now I'm going to rapid fire these last couple. We have Control Shift M, that opens up the problems panel. We have Control Shift U, that's going to open up the output panel. And then obviously we've talked about Control Tilde already. So that's a really easy way to navigate between the most common panels you'll use on the bottom section of your page. Also, Control Comma is going to open up your settings if you want to quickly modify your settings. And lastly, something that I find to be quite underrated is using the Alt plus left or right keys is going to allow you to navigate forward and backward. It's the same as if you hit these forward and backward navigations up here. So again, if you close something by accident or you move to a different file and you want to go back to where you were, you can use these Alt and left and right arrow keys to be able to navigate around. Now inside of a Mac, it's slightly different. You're going to be using Control plus the minus key or Control Shift minus to be able to navigate between these different views. Again, slightly different, but overall it's the same concept. Now the next thing I want to talk about is going to be find and replace as well as symbol management. So you're probably familiar with Control F. If you hit Control F, it is going to bring up a finder and you can search for something like normalized, and it's going to bring up all options inside this file that fit that particular typed in text. You can go around navigating between them. You can even make it a regex. You can make it so it's case sensitive and so on. Do whatever you want with it. You can also hit Control Shift F, and that's going to allow you to do a search globally across your entire application and all your different files. So if I searched for router, for example, you can see all these different files have a router inside them. Some lesser known keyboard shortcuts though are going to be the replace version of this. So if you hit Control H, that's actually going to bring up the find and replace version. So I could say normalized, I want to replace with norm, and now I can go ahead and I can say, you know what, replace all these different things that I want to do. For Mac, this keyboard shortcut is slightly different. It is Command Option F instead of Control H. Finally, if you want to do the global find and replace, it is Control Shift H, just like that. And now you can see I can type in normalize or router, and then I can replace it with route or whatever I want to do. And on a Mac, this is exactly the same. It's just Command Shift H. Now this symbol section is really cool because it allows us to really manipulate the different symbols inside of our application. And a symbol is essentially like a function, a variable, like any part of your code in particular. So let's say that we wanted to come in here and I wanted to take a symbol and replace the name for it. So this layout route, for example, I wanted to change the name of this. Now I could use that Control D trick to actually highlight all those different instances, but it's not perfect because it only matches on text. So it may select more than I want or not enough. So it's obviously not great. So instead what you can do is when you have that particular text highlighted or your cursor in the word, click F2. That's going to bring up a rename option. You can change it to whatever name you want. I'm just going to type it in as A so you can definitely see the difference. When I hit enter, you can see both instances have changed to that text A. And if I had something that was used across my entire application, it will replace it everywhere inside my application. For example, this route parser is used multiple places. I can come in here and I can replace this with route parser 2, and now it's been replaced everywhere in my application where I used my route parser. Now it may be hard to see that, but I can use the keyboard shortcut Shift F12, and that's going to show me all the places where this route parser is used. So here is where it's defined, that's the file I'm currently in. But if I look in my router provider, you can see here is where I'm actually calling my route parser. It's only used in one place, so you can see it in that particular code. This is one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts to be able to figure out where things are referenced inside of my code. There's actually an alternative version of this keyboard shortcut that's going to be Shift Alt F12, and that opens up a Finder window on the side with all the places where this code is used. This is really useful if you're referencing this code in lots of places because it's easier to parse than that inline window version that we had before. Now, if we wanted to do the opposite, for example, I'm in this file and I have my route parser and I want to see where that function is defined to see what that function looks like. There are a few different ways I can go about doing this. If I want to just peek it inline, what I can do is I can hold down Alt and click F12. That's going to open up that same peek window where I can say, okay, here's what that definition looks like. It's a really great way for me to just look at a small snippet of this definition if I just want to quickly glance at it. But what if I want to dive deeper by going into that full file? Well, I can just click F12 and it brings me to the file where that thing was defined. Also, what I can do instead, if you're using your mouse, is you can hold down Control and then click on that actual function name, and that's going to bring you directly to the function as well. Honestly, if there are particular keyboard shortcuts you take from this video, the ability to jump between references, where it's referenced and where the implementation and definition is, those are incredibly important keyboard shortcuts because it's something you do all the time. And without the shortcuts, it's kind of cumbersome to go back and forth between these different things. And the last kind of keyboard shortcut in this section I want to talk about is going to be searching for symbols. So if I hit Control-Shift-O, that allows me to search for all the different symbols defined in this file. So that's variable names, function names, everything like that. So for example, if I wanted to search for anything that has layout inside of it, you can see all these different symbols and where they are currently being defined. If I wanted to search globally across my entire project, I can hit Control-T, and now you can see I can search for all the different functions and components and everything inside my entire application. So again, if I wanted to search for layout, for example, I could say, oh, let's go to here, and this is going to be that layout for that particular section. This is only really useful if you have a rather specific variable name that you're searching for. If you have a generic variable name like layout or data, it's going to be hard to narrow down exactly what you need. Now, this next section is really important. It's how you deal with selecting text as well as multiple cursor placement. Now, the first two are very basic keyboard shortcuts, and that's the ability to select text without using your mouse. So if you have your text randomly in a word and you hold down Shift and you press one of the arrow keys, that'll just allow you to select one piece of text in the direction you press, and you can undo it by pressing the opposite arrow key. This is great if you just want to select a couple things and delete them, for example, or copy them. Another thing you can use is you can hold down Control and the left or right arrow key, and that allows you to essentially jump by an entire word at a time. And if you hold down Shift, that allows you to select an entire word at a time, which is really useful because now I can select much more text at once while I'm highlighting things inside my code. Now, if you're on a Mac computer, instead of holding down Control, you're going to hold down Options, but otherwise it works exactly the same. Now, another really common thing that you may want to do is add the same text or select the same sections in one particular file. For example, at the end of these filters, let's say both of these filters I want to add a map to the end. Well, I could come through and I could type map, and then I could highlight this and I could copy it and paste it down here. That would work just fine. But another option that I can do if I want to just do all of it with one single typing is I can hold down Alt and then just click on a new line. And that allows me to add a cursor anywhere that I click. So now when I type, I'm actually adding code in two different sections at the exact same time, which is really great for being able to quickly edit your code with multiple different sections. The one downside to this, though, is sometimes when you're going along, you have lots of different lines. So you're going through, you're clicking on all your different lines that you want to do things, and all of a sudden you accidentally click in the wrong place. And you're like, I now need to start entirely over with clicking all these different lines. I've ran into this problem a ton of times. What you can do instead is you can hit Control-U, and that undoes whatever the last thing you did with your cursor was. So for example, I selected this line between P and E. If I hit Control-U, you can see that cursor has disappeared, but all my other cursors has stayed in place. And this actually works with everything. It's literally the undo button for where your cursor is. So let's say that my cursor is here between the L and T, and then I click to put it between the A and T on path. If I hit Control U, you can see my cursor is moved back up to the original place it was. It's just essentially undo, but for your cursor, which is amazing. Another really useful keyboard shortcut is sometimes you want to select text at the very beginning of a few different lines, and it's hard to make sure your cursor is always in the exact right place and lining it up with the start of the line. So instead what you can do is you can just place your cursor where you want it to be, and then you can hold down Control Alt and use the up and down arrow keys, and that'll allow you to add cursors directly above or below in the exact same place. So now you can see I've added essentially a bunch of cursors all in the same place in this vertical row using that Control Alt up and down trick. Now, another really common thing that you may want to do is you're inside of an object or a function. You want to expand your selection to say, I want to select this entire object or this entire array. Doing this is actually quite easy with keyboard shortcuts. What you can do is you can hold down Shift, Alt, and then the left or right arrow keys. Left is going to minimize your expansion, and right is going to expand. You can see I've expanded to this full word. Now I've expanded to this entire parameter object here. Now I've expanded to everything inside this object. Now I've expanded to the full object. Here's the return keyword. Now I've got everything in my if statement. Now I have my full if statement. And as you can see, every time I click this, it just gets larger and larger, expanding out. And I can use the left arrow key to minimize my expansion. This is a great way to be like, okay, I want to delete that entire object and type in something new. Now, if you're on Mac, this is going to be Control Shift instead of the Control Alt. So make sure you use Control Shift instead. Now, if I do want to use my mouse to select a box of text, I can hold down Shift and Alt. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to select a box of text. So for example, you can see now I'm selecting a box of text based on wherever I'm dragging my mouse, which is really useful. Also, let's say I finished selecting this particular content, but I want to make it a little bit wider or larger. You can use Control Shift Alt as well as the arrow keys. And now I can expand my selection by hitting right or left. I can minimize it. I can use up to bring it up. I can use down to bring it down. This is a really great way to either start a selection. For example, I can just click right here. And now I can go ahead and I click down arrow key, the right arrow key, up, whatever I want to do to be able to make this box selection across a large area. Now, the last section I want to cover is debugging, and the very first keyboard shortcut, I can click F5, and that's going to start up my application in debugger mode. As you can see, it's starting up my application. And then what I want to do, like let's say it's hit a breakpoint in my application, F5 will also just continue until the next breakpoint is hit. So it's the start button as well as the continue button. If I wanted to stop my entire application, well, obviously you can see I can click this stop option, or I can just click Shift F5, and now that stops my debugging. So F5 to start it, Shift F5 to stop it. Now in our application, we have no breakpoints, but if I wanted to add a breakpoint on this layout routes, for example, what I could do is I could click F9, and that's going to add a breakpoint on that line. And if I wanted to add an inline breakpoint, for example, inside of this filter function, I could hit Shift F9, and that's going to add an inline breakpoint directly where my mouse is. So it's a really useful way to be able to add breakpoints for lines or inline. Now to be able to test these breakpoints, we can just click F5 to bring up, and you can now see immediately my application is running. It's hit that breakpoint, and you can see I have all this information over here. I can do a lot of different stuff inside my code. For example, I have the options of stepping over something, stepping into something, or stepping out of something, and they all have keyboard shortcuts associated with them. So if I wanted to step into whatever is going on, I could hit F11 and it's going to step into whatever's happening. Of course, in our particular use case, we're just calling .layout, so it's not actually stepping into anything, but that would step in if I was over a function, for example. I could also use the keyboard shortcut F10 to step over. So for example, if it was over a function, I didn't want to go into it, I could use F10. Or if I want to step out of something, I can use Shift and then F11. And that's going to step out of whatever function I'm currently inside of. We could more easily see this if I stop my debugger real quick, and instead of having this inline debugger breakpoint, instead I just put a breakpoint on my entire line. Now we can go ahead and we can restart our application with F5. You can see it stopped me on that line, and I want to specifically step into this. So I'm going to hit F11, and now you can see I'm directly inside of this function. And if I get to the point where I no longer want to be inside of here, I could just hit Shift and then I can hit F11. And it's going to step me out of that particular code. And now you can see that I'm on the next line of code. And if I want to step over this, for example, I can just hit F10 and it steps over instead of stepping in. Now, if I want to just continue to the next breakpoint, I can click F5, and now you can see we've hit this breakpoint again, and now we are done. I clicked F5 again. There's no more breakpoints inside of here. Now I can click F6 to actually pause my debugger, and essentially what that's going to do is the first time that anything happens on my page that executes code, it's going to immediately put a breakpoint there. So for example, if I bring this window over, just the act of me moving my window has triggered some code inside of React, and you can see we're deep inside the internals of React, which is not really important. I don't use this keyboard shortcut very often because often I don't want to just hit the very first thing. I just manually set the breakpoints where I want them by using F9. And that is all of my favorite VS Code shortcuts. And again, they're all inside of this cheat sheet right here that you can download. I've even highlighted all my favorite and most useful ones, and I have it in light mode, dark mode, Mac, and Windows. So whatever your operating system is and whatever your preferences are, I have the exact cheat sheet for you. So I'll link that down in the description so you can download it for easy references. With that said, thank you very much for watching and have a good day.